Chapter 5. Ride a Cock-Horse. He was a strange little man, not a dwarf, but made on so small a scale, so thin and wizened and bent in on himself, that he was scarcely as big as Mary. He had a sharp, brown face, lined and seamed like cracked leather, and his eyes were small and green and shining. He was dressed in wrinkled breeches and an old green jacket. As Mary, feeling shaken, puzzled, and remarkably foolish, picked herself up from the cobbles, the little man took a straw from his mouth, and spoke. "You'll be needing a few lessons," he said. Mary, dusting down her coat, stared at him. "Lessons?" He nodded. "Riding lessons. You shouldn't have tumbled off like that, though it's not a good ride, that besom. Tricky. You were lucky to get as far as this." Here he addressed the broomstick sharply, in what sounded like a foreign language. It had been frisking about nearby, but when the little man spoke it dropped to the ground and lay still. He got off the mounting block and picked it up. "But I don't understand," cried Mary. "Who are you? Where is this? How did it happen?" The little man paid no attention. He patted the broomstick and tucked it under one arm. "It'll stand quiet now, but we'd better be putting it in the stable till you'll be wanting it again. Come and I'll show you." And, carrying the broomstick, he led the way across the yard to where a half door stood shut and bolted across the dark interior of a stable. He undid the half door and led the way in. Mary followed. In the shaft of sunlight that sloped through the open door, motes of dust danced like fireflies. The floor was of ribbed stone, and there was a pleasing muddle of boxes and straw and sacks and ropes, such as you might find in any stable. There were even empty hay racks fixed to the wall, but no horses. Against the wall opposite the door, each in a little compartment like a bicycle stand, stood about a dozen brooms. Some were battered and old-fashioned in design, like Mary's, while some looked almost new. Towards these the little man, as he propped Mary's broomstick between two big, rather grubby garden besoms, gestured with contempt. "Modern stuff," he said, with a twist of his leathery face. "Mechanized, that's the word they use for it. Goes much faster, of course, but give me a good old-fashioned besom that takes a bit o' riding, like this one." He bestowed a pat upon the little broomstick. He seemed to take all the bewildering events so much for granted that Mary, afraid of seeming too ignorant, bit back her questions and merely said, with caution, "Yes, they do look newer, Mr. Flanagan's the name. Danny Flanagan. I'll take it kindly if you'd call me Danny. Newer, is it? Take a look at that now." He pointed to one bright new handle where a label still hung which bore the legend, Harrods. "Newer, is it?" he demanded again, his voice cracking with scorn. "Made yesterday, that's what it is, and of what? Not twigs, no, not good birch like a solid well-bred besom, not any more. All sorts of fancy stuff they're using now, with the grand names to it, like you'll get in Madam's labs. Nylon they call it." He spat. "Nylon. And 3 speed gears. What next? What next, I ask you? Engines they'll be using next. See that paper on the wall? Brought it with her last week, one o' them did. Thought I'd be interested," she said. "Interested? Take a look at it." Mary took a look. The offending paper was a page from a sales catalogue, which was tacked to the stable wall. It carried a picture of a cheerful and very smart lady sitting side saddle on a complicated-looking pink contraption, pouring steaming liquid from a coffee pot as she sailed through clouds like soapsuds. Above this was printed, in big black letters, "Witches. Harrods offer you the Hellebroom." Underneath, in smaller letters, was a paragraph where Mary glimpsed the phrases remote control, pastel colors, 2-stroke engine made of aluminum, matching telescope and coffee percolator, and at the bottom, in very small letters indeed, price £874.75. "Well?" demanded Mr. Flanagan. He was glaring fiercely at Mary. She thought she had never seen such bright green eyes. "It's awfully expensive," she ventured. He snorted. "Even if I'd twice the money for a broom like that, d'ye think I'd ever be using it? Me on a pastel-colored ladies' ride with an aluminium engine. Hellebroom." The contempt in his voice was biting. "You'd get me sooner on a feather mop, or one o' them newfangled hovercraft. It's the likes o' them that's going to take the bread and butter out o' me mouth. Oh, said Mary, startled by this very normal remark. Do you have bread and butter here? Mr. Flanagan stared. And why wouldn't we? Do you not have it yourself? You must be coming from a queer place indeed not to be having that. Oh, but we do. In fact, I've got some here. I brought a picnic lunch with me. She took her lunch packet out of her pocket, and began to open it. Would you like a sandwich, Mr. Flanagan? He shook his head. I'll be getting me own later. But you'd better eat yours now. There isn't much time. Come on out into the sun. And before she could ask him what he had meant, he led the way out of the stable and shut the half door behind them. The sun was beautifully warm. Mr. Flanagan went back to his old seat on the mounting block, and patted the stone beside him, inviting Mary to sit. To her great relief, for until that moment she had forgotten all about him, Mary saw Tib there, sitting placidly in the sunshine, washing his face. She sat down beside Mr. Flanagan and started to eat. Why did you say those new broomsticks would take the bread and butter out of your mouth, Mr. Flanagan? Danny. Why then, Danny? It's me job, said Mr. Flanagan simply. All me life I've taught riding. And I mean rail, genuine riding. That's not just pulling of levers and pushing of knobs, but how to stick on, whatever happens, in all the weathers, at all speeds, and how to be managing a bucking broomstick at 1,000 feet or so on a moonless midnight. With a storm coming up, he nodded at Mary, his green eyes glittering. That's riding, he said. And not only that, it's knowing the words to use. Like the words you said to my broom. Them words is simple enough. They're the stopping words. But there's a lot to learn. And you, my girl, said Mr. Flanagan sternly, have a lot to learn, I'd say. I misremember seeing you before. How long have you been coming for lessons? For lessons? Echoed Mary blankly. I've never been before. You mean riding lessons on that broomstick? Fine, I know you've had no riding lessons from me, said Mr. Flanagan. Or you'd not have been falling off at me feet the way you'd make a hole in the yard. No. It's the other lessons you'll be having at the college. College? Echoed Mary again. What college? He pointed across the yard to where, under the clock tower, the arched tunnel led from the stableyard out into the park. To one side of the archway was a notice fastened to the wall. Mary could read it quite easily from where she sat. Endor College. All examinations coached for by a competent staff of fully qualified witches, under the supervision of Madam Mumblechuk, M.M.B., Saw, Headmistress. That's it, said Mr. Flanagan. That's the college and one of the best of its kind. And now, if you've finished your lunch, you'd better be getting along. You don't want to be late for classes on your first day, do you now? But I don't want. Mary was interrupted by the sound of a bell, which came from somewhere inside the building. Hurry up, cried Mr. Flanagan, jumping off the mounting block, and pulling her down after him. That's the first bell. It's 3 minutes you've got now, and they'll be looking for you. He took her by the arm and urged her towards the archway. But I'd much rather stay here and talk to you, cried Mary, hanging back. I don't have to go in, do I? There's been some mistake. They're not really expecting me at all. Sure, and they are. Everybody knows you're here. Didn't you hear the alarm cock? As he hurried her forward, Mr. Flanagan nodded to the bright weathercock overhead, and it whirling round on its stick like it would be taking off for the moon or the gardens of Jerusalem. Come along now, me dear, don't be nervous. Your little cat's there already. And Mary saw that this indeed was true. Tib was ahead of them, trotting out of the archway into the sunlight of the park. He stopped and looked back. He looked alert and eager, as if this, thought poor Mary, was what he had been all along expecting to do. And that reminds me, said Mr. Flanagan at her elbow, don't be overlooking this, me dear. It's very strict they are, very strict indeed. And he pointed to another small but forbidding notice, which was fastened to the outer wall of the archway. It said, familiars not allowed in the park except on leash. Mr. Flanagan bobbed down like a diving duck and came up with an indignant Tib. Have you got a lead? No, I haven't. And besides, that's not a familiar, that's Tib, not a familiar. Black as he is, and with the eyes on him like emeralds. You'll be telling me next you're not a witch. And fine, we both know that you'd never have got that broomstick this far, and you with no lessons either, unless you knew the words. Quick now, there's the other bell. tie some string on him, and get away in hurry. His haste was so catching, and her own bewilderment so great, that almost without thinking Mary put her hand in her coat pocket, and brought out a length of old Zebedee's raffia. On this Mr. Flanagan pounced with a sound of satisfaction, and before she knew exactly what was happening, Mary found herself walking across a wide gravel sweep towards the great door of the house with one end of the raffia clutched tightly in her hand, and Tib, rather offended and very dignified, stalking ahead of her with the other end loosely tied round his neck. The air was very still, and very quiet. Not a single bird, not one, was singing in the trees, and now they were at the foot of the wide flight of steps that led up to the front door. There were griffins here too. They sat on their stone pedestals, one at each side of the steps. On the right-hand pedestal Mary saw yet another notice. It said, simply, "Trespassers will be transformed." Mary stared, stopped dead, then turned quickly to look behind her. Mr. Flanagan was nowhere to be seen, and as he went back to his stableyard, he had shut the gate behind him. The archway was barred by a solid slab of studded oak. Then the front door of the college opened, and a tall woman in black came out onto the head of the steps. She beckoned to Mary. Mary looked at Tib. Tib looked back with no expression whatever in his green eyes. The woman beckoned again. Mary walked up the steps towards her.